2026 is the year Cyclops finally got his time to shine.
To me, my X-Men.
Cyclops is the newest character added to Marvel Rivals. He will feature both heavily in X-Men 97 Season 2 and the upcoming Avengers Doomsday. By all accounts, Cyclops, after decades of being underrepresented, is finally getting the attention and love he deserves. For the longest time, Cyclops was sort of seen as the X-Men's least interesting member. And genuinely, despite multiple attempts throughout the comics' history to change this, it didn't really click that Cyclops is such a badass until the last couple of years. Like really since X-Men 97 and the recent Marvel vs. Capcom remastered collections. But why is that? Why was Cyclops, the leader of the X-Men, one of the founding members, such an underwhelming character in times past? And more importantly, what changed? Now, at his core, Cyclops has the heart of a great character, mainly because he's defined by tragedy and contradiction. He lost his entire family at a young age, seeing them scattered to the various corners of the universe or die. He is someone whose out-of-control powers hurt people. In the orphanage, he blew holes through walls, sent kids scattering due to his uncontrollable kinetic energy. Under Professor Xavier, he found a new family, the X-Men, fellow mutants like him struggling to learn and control their gifts. This is someone who needs everything under his control because if he loses control for himself for even a second, he will hurt those around him. Not just his friends, but also innocent bystanders who will then judge and fear him. He is acutely aware that as a mutant, he is feared, and he's also aware that they have reason to be afraid of him, because he can hurt them if he's not in complete control. And then he learned Professor X, his mentor, his father figure, has always used him as a pawn, even sacrificing Scott's own brother, Vulcan, Gabriel Summers, in an effort to complete a mission to save his fellow X-Men. Charles erased the memory of Vulcan in Scott's own mind to continue using him as a useful pawn. And upon realizing that, he assumes command of the team he was raised to lead. He is a man who needs control, who fiercely fights his loved new family, faces constant bigotry around him, and is used by the man who instilled his values, and as a result, finds himself drifting further and further into extreme measures to maintain control, to protect those he cares about, and even, in some ways, becoming the very person he criticized Xavier for being. He is a figure defined by tragedy and by ironic contradictions. And I bet no one but comic fans know about this, because none of this shit gets adapted.
He'll finish this one off. Optic blast! Optic blast! Optic blast! Optic blast! Damn, this guy's pretty good!
To start with, we got to accept one obvious fact. Cyclops is part of a team of X-Men that has undergone significant changes over the years to stand out. As the team becomes more diverse and more popular characters are added, the original 5 feel antiquated, feel boring almost. You see, your first team of X-Men consists of Cyclops, Beast, Iceman, Angel, and Marvel Girl, aka Jean Grey. Havoc and Polaris were added shortly thereafter, but they're not a part of the team yet, Havoc being one of Scott's many brothers. And of these 5 core characters, 4 are very visibly different than they were at their debut, at least to normal audiences. Jean Grey and Beast, I think, are the most obvious examples of changing visually. Jean has become host to the Phoenix Force, becoming a cosmic entity that has reshaped the Marvel Universe multiple times. 2 separate films have failed to adapt the story properly, to the point where some fans forget that you can do a Jean Grey story without the Phoenix Force as a key plot point. But then there's Beast. I think a lot of casual fans forget that Beast started out as a normal-ish looking mutant, more like the blue-eyed loving Thing in terms of a burly, strong, but friendly figure, only developing his iconic fuzzy look later on as mutations evolved. Beast has also integrated himself into the larger Marvel universe, becoming an Avenger in the book's 137th issue as a reserve member before officially joining the team in issue 151. He is the connection between the X-Men and the Avengers for much of the X-Men's early history. That means he was an Avenger long before Spider-Man, who the films have shown affiliated with the team repeatedly. Also, Beast has undergone some more disturbing changes as of late. While earlier Beast was this gentle, sophisticated giant, more modern Beast is basically a Machiavellian villain. A trend I think started with the introduction of Dark Beast in the Age of Apocalypse, an alternate version of Beast twisted by his scientific inclinations over the core humanity that defined the character for decades before. And our current Beast, I think, and many other fans think, was influenced by the dark, twisted path Dark Beast took. All these characters have undergone substantial changes that place them in a very different spot than where they started. Meanwhile, Cyclops is the leader of the X-Men, and he's Jean Grey's lover, or Emma Frost's lover, depending on what point of the comics you're reading. The comics often put Scott in challenging situations. He loses X-Men, he's confronted by bigotry, the hypocrisy of his leadership, and even the sympathetic motives of his enemies. He is a person who relies on others but tries to maintain order. But every adaptation just boils him down to one word: leader. Cyclops is the team field leader of the X-Men. On the ground, he issues commands, but he's never really the focus. He's a distant leader, or captured, or apprehended, or just not present in an episode. He's never a character who undergoes an arc. At least, most adaptations don't give him an arc, outside of getting out of the way of Wolverine, a more popular character who audiences want to see more of. Most adaptations of the X-Men are nostalgic-centric. The vast majority of X-Men adaptations do not adapt plot lines or even characters after the mid-90s, for the most part. I mean, you can say Azazel shows up, but his storyline's not adapted, he's just kind of there. If elements from the future are incorporated, they're just kind of plugged in and they do nothing with them, really. I mean, really, outside of X-Men 97, the only two major X-Men properties to significantly adapt huge chunks of the comics after the year 2000 are Logan and Deadpool and Wolverine. And Logan is only adapting Old Man Logan very loosely, as well as X-23 from the cartoon X-Men Evolution. And both of those don't have Cyclops. Cyclops remains a defender of mutant kind in every adaptation, sure, and even as he becomes more extreme in the comics, he still feels like the same core character, right? The Cyclops you probably imagine in your head watching the films is not the same Cyclops you see in the comics, and even a cursory read of the comics can tell you that much. You see, Cyclops is most interesting when he is shown to be a defender of his fellow mutants, and brushing up against Xavier's philosophies as well as Magneto's. He forms a pseudo-triangle of ethics between Professor X and Magneto, challenging both belief systems while being simultaneously shaped by them. In addition, Cyclops has a complicated family history. Havoc, his first brother introduced, has his own arc and his own storyline. His father has a ton of cool space adventures after his wife is killed by aliens attacking a private plane they have. He goes off to join the Starjammers, reunites with his son much later on. It's a whole thing. His genetic line, ultimately, is the subject of interest, or rather obsession, of Nathaniel Essex, aka Mr. Sinister, a guy who later clones his wife and does a whole lot of things with that. But Cyclops' older brother, Gabriel Summers, as mentioned before, Vulcan, he was part of the X-Men briefly, as part of the team that was sent to save the original X-Men during the Savage Genesis storyline. The alternate story that is hidden from the X-Men prior to the giant-sized X-Men #1 that introduced Chris Claremont to the X-Men team, where the original X-Men were kidnapped by the island of Krakoa, and it's a mission that went south, and Xavier makes a new team of X-Men afterwards, the iconic new X-Men, to save the old X-Men, but erases the team from the memories of Scott Summers because they all die. It's a whole thing. Which I think is where the problems really start, right? See, Cyclops just kinda got overshadowed by his new team, didn't they? You know, Storm, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Colossus. Immediately, they come with these intriguing new powers, these cool backstories, complete histories, some form of bigotry to anchor them to the material of the allegory of the X-Men. And also, Wolverine just became the most popular character ever, immediately. Which, leads us to that love triangle which defines Cyclops in every adaptation since. Cyclops' main storylines as a leader in the Chris Claremont run was him prioritizing his leadership duties over his personal affairs. But his personal affairs define the character in this arc. However, most adaptations focus on the love triangle. Cyclops, Jean, Wolverine. Who's going to end up with who? Do they all get together? I mean, in some versions they do, but that's a whole other discussion right there.
Oh, and Logan. Stay away from my girl.
Now, I do want to point something out with the Claremont run. When Chris Claremont wrote the X-Men, Wolverine never had a shot with Jean. He wasn't even like a contender. He was he had a crush, but that wasn't the same as he has a chance with Jean. He was a smelly, short guy who had no shot with his established romance. He was a new guy crushing over an established, taken woman. He was interested in her, but Jean never had any interest in him. But that's not to say this triangle didn't damage Cyclops' rep. You see, you gotta remember, prior to Claremont, the X-Men were less popular than the Fantastic Four, then Spider-Man, then the Hulk, then even Iron Man, really. So, all these new characters, they helped elevate the X-Men. Jean becoming the Phoenix, that elevated the team. That was interesting, exciting, new. But then there's Cyclops, the leader. He became a tragic figure in Jean's storyline, because Jean was the focus of the book for a while with the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix saga, and Jean ultimately took her own life. However, after the Dark Phoenix storyline, Wolverine's popularity continued to mount. He got his own solo title, then another. He cameoed in everyone's books. By the time the X-Men animated series came out in the 90s, Wolverine was the most popular character. Like, sure, Cyclops was still the leader, but he was second fiddle to Wolverine by a far margin.
I go where I wanna go.
Second fiddle to Storm, second fiddle to Rogue, Gambit, all of them. And this is reflected in how many episodes Cyclops doesn't feature in. The first Cyclops-centric episode is his wedding with Jean in Season 2. This means Bishop, Jubilee, Wolverine, Beast, Colossus, Magneto, Rogue, and Storm all get character-centric episodes before Cyclops. Hell, a ton of the episodes with the whole team in Season 1 don't even have Cyclops in them. Like, in one episode, he gets kidnapped by the Morlocks and Storm has to save him. That's one of his big episodes. The first Cyclops-centric episode that does not involve Jean comes in the middle of Season 3, 34 episodes into the show. We're past the halfway point of the show. And he ends up fighting the Purple Man, a villain more famously associated with Jessica Jones than with the X-Men. By contrast, Wolverine's first major episode was like a couple episodes in, and he got multiple episodes per season focused on his backstory, his relationships, his history, etc. And this fed into the X-Men films that came out under Fox. In the Fox films, Wolverine is the main character. He has the core problem of each film. He resolves the plot of each film. In the first X-Men movie, what does Cyclops really do? He fires his beams a couple times, he gets kicked around by Toad, he gets locked up by Magneto, and at the end of the movie, he shoots Magneto once to distract Wolverine so he can save the day. He's kind of irrelevant. In X2, he's taken out very fast by Lady Deathstrike, and then he's under mind control for the rest of the film. In X3, he's killed off by Dark Phoenix in seconds. Hell, his second scene, he's dead. When he comes back later on in the prequel series, he's barely relevant. He's not even the main character. He's tertiary to Jean Grey, and Jean Grey is tertiary to Professor Xavier, to Magneto, to Mystique, to Beast, to everyone. He's so irrelevant. Hell, even his role in the Dark Phoenix saga, it's given to Wolverine in X3. He is forced to kill his true love, Jean Grey. He is haunted by Jean Grey in The Wolverine. Everything Scott could do is given to Logan. And for many audience members, this is the version of Cyclops they saw. At least outside animation, I think the only adaptation does Cyclops any justice is X-Men Evolution, where you see him grow and develop as a real character. Here Wolverine is too old to harbor any crush on the teenage Jean Grey, so Jean and him are not a factor. That means it's just Scott and Jean in a relationship that develops over time. Jean also never becomes the Phoenix in X-Men Evolution, which removes the two big stories Jean is often associated with. And that means that neither of them are shackled by the expectations of properly adapting that story, which means the writers can devote more time instead to establishing Cyclops and Jean as characters. Cyclops, an idealist forced to confront humanity's cruelties and grow accordingly. But then there's the comics. During the era of the MCU, Marvel Comics started to de-emphasize certain characters who weren't going to make Marvel Studios money in the film department. Fox owned the film rights to both Fantastic Four and the X-Men, so both teams kind of faded from the public view. But it doesn't help that during this time, the mutants were declined in population, thanks to one Scarlet Witch. Now, that's not to say that they disappeared entirely in this era. I mean, Jonathan Hickman's iconic Fantastic Four run led right into the Secret War event, and Wolverine was always a major player throughout the Marvel Universe. But the X-Men felt increasingly disconnected from the greater Marvel Comics universe, in part because of M-Day. At the end of the event House of M, Scarlet Witch depopulated mutant kind. By uttering the words, "No more mutants," her chaos powers allowed her to rewrite reality and erase the majority of mutants, removing the X gene, leaving them normal people. The mutant population was reduced to under 200, thanks to Scarlet Witch, and this radicalized Cyclops. He now was a fierce defender of the remaining mutants because there were so few left. They needed a protector. And with Savage Genesis, the event that I keep referencing that involved Vulcan, happening before that, revealing the full extent of Professor Xavier's manipulative nature, Cyclops became even more aware of his responsibility as a protector of mutant kind. And that further radicalized him. When Hope Summers, the first new mutant, was born, he became obsessed with Hope Summers as a potential means to revitalize mutant kind, even if that meant killing threats to mutant kind, even other mutants like Bishop, who he saw as a possible threat to Hope Summers' survival. Many loyal X-Men broke with Cyclops in the event known as Schism. Wolverine especially took a whole chunk of mutants with him to the Xavier Mansion, now renamed after Jean Grey. Beast became so genuinely concerned about the radicalized path Cyclops went down that he brought back the younger iteration of the X-Men via time travel to the present to illustrate to Scott how far he had fallen from his former path. But that didn't really save him or stop things. This eventually culminated in the event known as Avengers vs. X-Men, where Hope was targeted by the Avengers because they feared Hope would become inhabited by the Phoenix Force, and under Cyclops' increasingly erratic perspective, she might just eradicate mankind, threatening the survival of all life on Earth, even mutants. Iron Man tried to break apart the Phoenix Force as it came to Earth, but ironically ended up breaking it into 5 pieces, which entered into the bodies of Cyclops, Emma Frost, Colossus, Magik, and Namor, creating the Phoenix Five. But eventually, Cyclops consolidated all 5 parts of the Phoenix Force into himself, becoming the new Dark Phoenix. Professor Xavier tried to stop Cyclops, but good luck fighting a force of nature, especially one who has had enough of your nonsense. This is when Scott Summers slew Professor Xavier, killed him. Hope and Scarlet Witch, however, were able to restore mutant kind by channeling the Phoenix Force into themselves and using that power along with Scarlet Witch's chaos power to undo the events of M-Day. Cyclops' actions, though radical, did result in mutant kind coming back, but he also became the Marvel Universe's greatest villain in a massive cosmic showcase. Cyclops became a renegade mutant leader who took increasingly extreme approaches to protecting the dwindling population of mutants. But frankly, given all Cyclops had experienced over the years, given the Sentinels, given the multiple human radicals who tried to persecute mutant kind, it's actually kind of hard to look at what he did and went, yeah, no, Cyclops was totally wrong.
You're ungrateful. We fight, risk our lives for you. Evil mutants, robots, crazy aliens. Because I have to stomach your questions and prove that I'm a person.
He confronted the ugly truth that the heroes had ignored the oppression mutants faced, but he was written off as a villain for rejecting the mutant oppression that his people faced on the regular, and not being interested anymore in Professor Xavier's pure dream of complete integration. And honestly, I kind of like this arc of him just being fucking tired of everything. Tired of the Avengers never prioritizing mutant rights, of society consistently funding Sentinel programs and human terrorist organizations hurting mutants. He's sick and tired of this nonsense, and he shows it. This is what happens when a good man is pushed to his limits after many incidents of pure horror. A man driven to control all aspects of life, now confronted with the uncontrollable. It's heartbreaking, but it makes sense, doesn't it? In the mainstream media at the time, though, Cyclops was the boring leader. He was kind of a stick in the mud. He was kind of had something up his ass.
Stay away from my girl.
But here,
The truth is we're nothing like you. Thank God, because it's the only reason you people are still alive.
hell, I mean, the films even get his concussive blasts right. Like, what are they? Heat vision? Are they force? Like, in the films, makes no sense. In the comics, it's pure concussive force. Simple. It's not heat vision, it's just red visually. That's it. It's that simple.
I don't shoot lasers.
Yeah, you do.
No, I don't.
What are you saying? That's your thing. That's what you do.
Yeah, but they're not lasers.
Then what are they?
They're punches.
What?
There's no heat involved. They're beams of pure force. So they're not like a laser. They're more like a punch. And they come from the punch dimension.
You're making that up.
That's a real place.
Shut up.
It's the truth. My eyes are actually just portals that open into the punch dimension, which is a dimension of nothing but pure kinetic punch energy. And then that comes out.
Hold on. Hank, get in here.
What are you doing?
Good morning, everyone.
A basic read of Cyclops might compare him to Captain America. They're both leaders, they were both perceived as kind of sticks in the mud at first by modern audiences, before over time, their full, fleshed out characters became more evident. But that's not a very strong comparison, because Cap ultimately does align himself with one central motive and holds himself to a high standard. Cyclops' standards are far more fluid, as he becomes more extreme. He doesn't just become disenchanted with America, realizing that Vietnam is a war we shouldn't be in. He becomes disenchanted with Professor Xavier after realizing the man who taught him everything was a goddamn liar.
Oh, how I've waited to say these two words to you, old friend. Shut up.
Cyclops ultimately became a third branch. As opposed to Wolverine and his new school for mutants and Magneto's extremism, he became a villain who fought for mutant liberation. And this was especially effective when he had destroyed the Inhumans' Terrigen Mist. A mist that creates Inhumans but can kill mutants. This cost him his life because he ingested the mist, and it turns out it does in fact kill mutants, as Cyclops found out firsthand. That was a bit of a sacrifice there. Don't worry, he gets better. For that matter, so does Professor X, and he gets this cool looking helmet, so that's a thing, I guess. During the Krakoa arc, wow, Krakoa comes up a lot in a Cyclops retrospective, doesn't it? Mutant kind finds themselves living in a new continent. This is not the first time this happened. I mean, there's Genosha, but the Krakoa arc focused on mutants kind of self-governing amongst themselves, with the quiet council of higher-level mutants dictating the path forward for mutants. Cyclops became a figure to defend mutant kind from any threat. While his actions did lead to schisms between mutants, he now found himself as a protector. He became a hero to mutant kind, acting against the Quiet Council if it meant the greater good. And so while Cyclops became a freedom fighter, fighting the Avengers themselves for mutant society, modern audiences just thought the guy was captured and boring and dull and had a stick up his ass. Aside from X-Men Evolution, X-Men 97 I think is the key element that made people Cyclops fans. Only this was done after years of conditioning to believe Cyclops was boring, so I think it was more effective in this sense. This series starts with Cyclops as the leader of the X-Men. Xavier in the finale of the 90s series is seemingly killed off. Don't worry, he also gets better. And so Cyclops now leads the X-Men, even though Xavier left the entire school to Magneto, and so there's that interesting power structure there. He had to represent mutant kind in a world that begun to marginally accept mutants until genocide happens.
I promised a boy a future free of fear, only to watch his frightened eyes be vaporized inside his tiny skull, because he believed in me, in the dream you had me sell.
But even then, Cyclops recognizes that humanity's acceptance of mutant kind is extremely conditional, as seen with his famous interview speech.
Because I have to stomach your questions and prove that I'm a person. I lie because the truth is we're nothing like you.
Over the course of the first season, several mutants sour on Xavier's dream as the hopeless reality of oppression rears its ugly head, including Cyclops. I mean, hell, Rogue especially, but also Cyclops. And all while Nathaniel Essex fucks with Cyclops' life by cloning his wife Jean Grey and kidnapping his son and infecting him with a virus. That son turned out to be Cable. Cyclops becomes one of the main characters of the season alongside Rogue and kinda Jubilee, really. And while Cyclops' powers are still outside of his control, he uses them far more effectively, using it to move around fast, to hit things, to slow a descent. It becomes a very versatile weapon that isn't just hit things hard with red beam. This earned Cyclops so much goodwill, to the point where Cyclops, returning in Avengers Doomsday, brought more cheers than Steve Rogers returning to the same movie. And the film seems set to position him once more against the Avengers. Now Cyclops stands firm and attentive against their overwhelming cultural footprint. But I think there's a bigger reason why people like Cyclops now, and it ties in with everything we just mentioned. Society isn't doing too well right now. See, one huge thing about the X-Men is that they're representative for oppressive minorities. And oppressive minorities, after decades of cruelty and harshness, are fucking pissed and tired. Obama was president, companies celebrated Pride, healthcare for women was improving, disability support increased, only for everything to backslide when new administrations came to power. And new bigoted media rose up to demonize said minorities. And conspiracy theories about bathrooms, public executions, the works. Like the Sentinels rounding up mutants and island sanctuaries being led to siege, we saw that in real time. People being targeted for the nature of their birth. I think many people, when reading or watching X-Men as a kid, saw Xavier and his X-Men as heroes who would win out at some point, find common ground between mutant kind and humanity. X3 even features a tease that the president is welcoming of mutants now after the events of the previous two films. In many ways, that feels like the Obama era, and modern X-Men feels like the harsh aftermath of realizing that we're not living in a post-racism world, but rather a world that hid its racism for one moment just a little, and then right back to the racism.
Know what I hate about your kind? You act like you got it so bad. Normal people have it hard too. Harder. We just have the dignity not to whine about it.
But as the horrors of life continue on, our perspectives shift, right? We get Magneto now. We see his anger at an unfair world. And we see people who unironically believe that tolerating minorities leads to the extinction of the majority race. Much like how the Sentinels and Bastion believe this in X-Men 97.
Tolerance is extinction. But even worse is empathy.
Tolerance leads to extinction, they say, because apparently tolerating a marginalized minority results in your station in life somehow being made worse. Oppression is an instrument to maintain control, and that control can only be maintained through horrible violence. And we see the machine at work. We see the propaganda rising and rising and grinding until nothing but bones and powder is left behind, until the blood, sweat, and tears of those who fought for some marginal amount of rights are whittled down to statues that can then be knocked down and erected with a monument to the oppressors who they fought against decades prior. We live in an unfair world where our heroes turn a blind eye to blatant bigotry.
The cry of black power is at bottom a reaction to the reluctance of white power to make the kind of changes necessary to make justice a reality for the Negro.
The only way to respond to an unjust world is one simple declaration: no more. And thus Cyclops has become a figure of the moment, the man who did everything by the book and still lost everything, who did everything right and still watched his dreams burn, who watched his fellow companions die, and finally, staring at all of this after years of being told what the way was, where the line in the sand was drawn, finally utters no more. It's no coincidence, I think, that Cyclops in Marvel Rivals is introduced breaking free of a corporate prison where he's experimented on, ostracized and isolated from society, rescuing Moon Girl. Cyclops is a man who has had enough, but still fights, still pursues, has not given up to despair, but been empowered by incalculable amounts of despair. And this is what the films have always failed. By making him just some basic love interest for Jean, who's not as interesting as Wolverine by any metric, they fail to realize who Cyclops is. He is a man trying to maintain control, with uncontrollable powers, with blatant bigotry, who tries his best to keep everyone safe, who believes the rules will protect him, but only as time goes on, he realizes these rules are nothing. He is a man of contradiction, a man driven by pain. And by embodying the pain and rage so many in the real world feel when looking at injustice, he becomes a hero. Maybe he's a terrorist to some, but riots have always been seen as a destructive measure of a force of pain. And as one famous man once said,
I think we've got to see that a riot is the language of the unheard.
Oh, damn! You really got me there!
Fuck, no way. Come on, surely you jest. Surely you jest.
You really got me fair and square!
I mean, you know, it was nothing.